Hey guys, what's going on? This is Dr. Bagley. I apologize for not looking like a Dr. Bagley. I'm actually just at my office. I had to do a couple of things and I had an idea of what I wanted to talk about today because I'm actually going to go out and enjoy the weather. And so I'm not sure if I'm going to stay out there for a little while, but since it's fresh on my mind, I want to talk to you today about triggers and trauma within relationships. All right, so this is going to be a little sciencey, but not too technical. I'm gonna just really keep it very, very simple so everyone can, what we should understand it at the very basic level, okay? So we can understand the traumas and then triggers and relationship and how all that ties on. We'll talk a little bit about the drugs, what, how, and how it's controlled and so on and so forth. So let's go to the board, give you an outline of what I'm going to talk about, and let's talk about it. All right, great. Oh, how's everyone doing today? Perfect. All right, here's the scenario. We have a female who is now dating a male. However, her history, she's dated X, Y, and Z. Now, in context, because she dated X, Y, and Z, male has been triggering her because of what happened to X, Y, and Z to her. So we're going to talk about the what, the how, and the controlling aspect of how to control yourself when you've been triggered and very mild traumas that, or major miles, whatever, how there that works out. But the point is, a trauma is a trauma, right? And depending on who it is. So then we're going to talk about the neural cortex, the limbic system, and then the reptilian complex. Real fast. This part right here gives you your run. Do I run from you? Do I have sex with you? Or those kind of things. Very instant. Then the limbic system it's a system. Hey, Kelly, how are you doing? It's a system because it's controlling your emotion. That's that second layer inside your brain. And the neural cortex is the exterior part of your brain that everyone sees on pictures. That is your storyline. So let me go back and let's talk about this scenario and how these guys traumatize her and how she's been triggered by this guy and how all of that works out utilizing the brain. All right. Boom. What's going on? What's going on? It's a lovely day. Like I said, I apologize for looking like this. I'm actually going to do this recording and head on out. And I just wanted to give it to you because I wasn't sure when I'm coming back. So let's get into it. Woman dates a guy. The guy triggers her, and that trigger, what is a trigger? All it is a remembrance of a memory. Okay, remembrance of a memory. The problem with memory is that when you've been traumatized, it's hard to get rid of that memory. And that's what everyone is trying to do. You're trying to get rid of the memory. The problem with getting rid of the memory is you can't. There is no drug, there is no surgery, there is nothing out there. The reason you can't get rid of memory is because the neural cortex, that outer side of it, is made up little neurons. So when you have a memory, it builds the neuron for storage. Okay. So when you're in a relationship and that relationship goes bad, that trauma is now becomes a memory. It's a memory of an experience. So at the root of triggers, you can be triggered because someone did something, a smell or any of your senses can trigger a memory. When that memory is triggered, if it is a trauma, how do we cover that trauma? We can't. So in a sense of addiction, let's look at it in a sense of addiction. So a person has been traumatized here. This in the brain is a neural cortex. There've been memories been built. How do they disguise that? How do they hide it? There's no drug that you can take in your body to get rid of it. There is no addictions that's going to cover it up. There is nothing you can do that's going to cover up a memory. You can't suppress it. with any drug or alcohol or person or food or any of the addictions, gambling and any of those things, because what you're counterintuitive to what you're trying to do is you're trying to suppress a memory with other bad memories. I'll give you an example. Someone who was in drugs. They've been traumatized. They use drugs to suppress the memory, but now the drugs is giving them another bad experience. So negative on top of negative just keeps building negative. At the end of the day, that addiction is going to take over the body, which takes over the environment of their world. And yet that memory will never go away because it's still present. Now, on the counseling side, and there's some uneducated therapists and counselors who say, here's your memory. Let's go back in history and remember a good time. Well, let me tell you, that is idiotic and stupid. Why? Because this good time was good, but it still leads up to the bad memory. So, in context, how do we get over the trauma? How do we get over that? So if we can deal with trauma just by itself, the trauma from a boyfriend, breakup, girlfriend, a trauma from a cheating, a trauma from family, friends, all kinds of trauma. How do we get rid of trauma? You have to suppress memory with memory. In other words, you have to take negative memory and suppress it with good memory. And as you do good memories, you're going to suppress it. In other words, the neuron within the neurocortex is building new memory in your brain, which then suppress the old memory. Yes, you're still going to remember it, but you're still suppressing it. Now, as you suppress it with good memory on top of bad memories, right? How do you suppress it? You suppress it with good from the bad. Okay, how does it come back out? It's called trigger. A person does something and that triggers that memory that is down here to now come back up. Okay, that's the problem with triggers. Okay, triggers take all the work that you did, all the time that you were with this great person, and then all of a sudden it brings it back up to the forefront. Okay, what happens in a relationship is just that. X, Y, and Z boyfriends in this scenario here was bad to woman, and her bad experience is compressing on top of bad experience. Then she gets male partner, and that male partner is now suppressing good memory on top of bad memory, which is awesome and fine by itself until good guy, man, takes a memory from down here and triggers her and then brings that memory up here. The problem with that, and ladies and gentlemen, for all of us, when you've been triggered, you try to rationalize that emotion. It's an emotion. Why? Because the neural cortex remembers. The limbic system is the very thing that causes emotion. Emotion is nothing more than hormones. Hormones then trigger body. Okay, so memory remembers something down here, brings it back up. I remember it. That remembrance triggers off the limbic system, the hormones. That hormone is a trigger, then goes into the body, which now my heart rate, my breathing, anxiety kicks in, and stress kicks in, and all of those things. At the time you had the stress, you brought it up through a trigger. That experience is still now present, and because it's present, is addressing and attaching itself to the new person. And that's the problem with a lot of relationships, especially relationships who didn't have a break, because the shorter of the break, the more triggers. The longer of the breaks, the less triggers, but they're still triggers. So that's what a trigger is to the trauma. A person has been traumatized, let it be through boyfriends or wherever. You can't get rid of the trauma by adding negative on top of negative. So there's no drugs out there. There's no alcohol. There's no food. There's no person. There's not enough sex in the world that can get rid of a trauma because it's neurocortex, a memory. When you have a relationship, just realize good memory suppresses bad memory. But then all of a sudden, a trigger takes a bad memory down here, brings it up forefront. Then you have the opportunity, or not opportunity, but you have this situation where that newness time, but the old feeling is now applied to new partner. Okay, how do we control the triggers? You can't. It's just unfortunate that you can't control it, because it's just a neurocortex. It's a storage. It's stored there. And because it's stored there, you can't control it. You can't get rid of it. You just have to suppress it. So if you can't get rid of the storage, how do we adjust the triggers? You can't stop the triggers either, because triggers are just triggers. You're just triggered. You can walk down the street. There's a bakery right there. You smell the bakery. You smell the bakery, and then the bakery gives you the smell of when grandmama used to cook the bakery too. So in context, you're always triggered. It just depends on what the type of trigger, what memory does it trigger. Okay. In a relationship, the worst thing you can do, and we'll talk about how to control it once you're triggered. Step number one is what you need to do is realize there is not a pattern. X, Y, and Z X's and man or woman today relationship, there shouldn't be no pattern between what this person did to trigger versus that person. Now, why do I say there's not a pattern? There's not a pattern because of motive. We don't know motive person now and motive people then were the same motive. And so if it's not the same motive, then you have to look at and examine it for what it is at now. If the person triggered you, then you have to realize that person is that person. Yes, they might have done something equal to trigger, right? But at the end of the day, you have to look for them at who they are. Okay. When you look at them for who they are, do not compare them to someone X, Y, and Z. If you compare them to X, Y, and Z, what you're saying to them in your mind is they're the same, and guess what you're going to do? Cause and effect. You're going to treat them just like X, Y, and Z. And that is not a good thing. All right. So now you've been triggered. Now you express it to new partner. How do I work that out? Let them realize that that is not them. So you have to control your body. That's not them. That's not X, Y, and Z. Control your body. Calm down. Breathe it out. Okay. Next thing you need to do is communication. Because you've been triggered, you need to let your new person know this is what triggered me. This is what the trigger was that brought out, or the memory, I should say, that brought out of me. And could we try to work it out where it's not going to trigger me again? That's what you're supposed to do. Talk it out, communicate. Everyone has traumas within our lives. The older we get, the more trauma. But at the end of the day, you can control it so it doesn't affect your new partner. All right. So once you control yourself, you communicate with the other person, the motive of the new person should dictate if it's a X, Y, and Z issue, or it's just an accident of coincidence. If it's just a coincidence, then work it out with that person. But be mindful, once you've been triggered, it's going to take some time to suppress it again. And it's not the new partner's problem, or I should say it's not the problem, it's not the problem. It's not the new partner's fault that X, Y, and Z was buried and it's now back up in the forefront called memory, and new partner brought trauma, or triggered and brought memory out. It's not the new partner's fault that the trigger happened. It's just they didn't know sometimes. And now that it's out, guess what you have to do? You have to now continuously go back and redo your work over, and that is suppress with good. Negative unto negative will never get rid of the first negative. Negative, and then have positive on top of negative, it covers negative all of the time. But in time, you just have to compress it, suppress it. So be mindful of the triggers and trauma in your relationship. All relationship, there are triggers, but be mindful. When you're triggered, breathe it out, control yourself, talk to your partner, talk about what triggered you and what the memory is of the triggering, and then see if the motive of that person, it will be where they be working with you. And if so, then know that what you have to do is get back with positive. There's no explanation. There's no counseling needed. There's none of that stuff. I don't need to tell you what happened back with X, Y, and Z, why it's here. You know why it's here. You know why you've been traumatized because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, past histories. So what you have to do is get back on and start building good, positive memory. Fast. You've been triggered. Oh my gosh, I need to calm down. Hey dude, hey girl, I've been triggered. This is what you did that triggered me. I know it's not your fault of X, Y, and Z's problem, but I have X, Y, and Z. Okay, fine. Can we not do this again? Partner says, oh, sorry, I won't do it again. We'll work it out. Let's work it out. You got to start building positive. Build positive to compress it, to suppress it. All right. Let me look at a book real fast. Hold on a second. Here. All right. So this is another psychiatrist, Renee. This is a nice book. All right. I'm hoping it's not backwards when I come out. So let me do this. Let me reverse you guys so you can see this book. This is an awesome book. There we go. Perfect. I want you to get this book. This book here is nice. It talks about repressed memories. Okay. She's also a psychiatrist, and she wrote that wonderful book. I read it and loved it. And, you know, when I was going through school and all that, I actually understood it. But now I understand a little bit more as my personal creative side of it and my own research and all that. But that's a good book to read and talk about triggers and suppressing versus repressed. Okay. Bringing back when you've been triggered, triggering memories. Okay. When you have a memory that's been past tense, come back up, calm down, talk it out. What triggered you? What was X, Y, and Z? What was the issue? Could we not work it out? New partner says, awesome, sorry, we work it out. Immediately, how do we start repressing the memory? Positive on top of negative. Immediately. Okay? It's not new partner's fault of the X, Y, and Z memory. It's just new partner triggered an X, Y, or Z back on. So suppress it back and your relationship will move forward. And that's the key when you've been traumatized in contacts, moving forward in relationships. There is nothing you can do. If you have a negative trauma, we can talk about the trauma. We can talk about the event. We can all talk about it. But at the end of the day, there is nothing we can do to suppress it except for positive memory. It's going to take time if it's a fresh trauma. It'll take time, but give it time. It'll be all right. Boyfriend, girlfriend issues, the shorter time of meeting someone new, you're going to be triggered more. The longer time, trigger less. Everyone gets triggered. How do you deal with it? That's positive on top of negative. Okay. So this is Dr. Bagley. Again, I apologize. I feel kind of funny looking at this way and talking about this subject. But I'm about to get on outside and enjoy the day, the weather, and I advise you to do the same. be mindful of what the state is requiring us to do. But at the end of the day, get out and enjoy the day. All right. That's Dr. Bagley. Thank you very much. Let me say hi and wave to everyone. How you guys doing? Beautiful. Thank you very much for spending your time with me. And until then, I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.